Oh, oh, oh. Portia doth walk across the cobblestone as the clouds do glade across the sky. Oh,
Oh, why, thank thee, for I really could not have crossed this wide stretch of path without thy help. Oh, ugh.
oh, ugh. Hath thou put the foot of a beggar in mine own soup in this moment? 'Tis more vile than any other creation I have ever seen. Oh,
Oh, I wish thy lips had uttered other words. For if, yea, they had even kept themselves sealed, I might not have to bear this news to thy father, and see you banished from this noble kingdom. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Muprov Musings. I'm one of your hosts, Hal Munger. This is episode 20, and joining me now on the line is Julian Bernardo.
hey. Welcome everybody back to a wonderful, beautiful episode of Muprov Musings. I hope that you have all had breakfast already. It's a very important meal. And I hope that you have a glass of water by your side. Because if you're doing this episode along with us, you might get a dry throat. So we're going to be throwing out a lot of guttural and emotional noises today.
Yeah, and all those noises might center around one crafty syllable. You know it. It's glowing. It's totally awesome.
You should boast about it.
Give it a standing ovation.
Yeah, we're talking about your favorite syllable.
Oh!
Oh. O is our syllable of choice today. And why is O our syllable of choice for this stuff?
Because we're talking about emotions. And Shakespearean emotions are often expressed with the word oh.
Oh. So you're saying that that's something that people legit might say in a play? Just
All
straight
the
up O.
time. And it's a great way also because so often emotions are done out to the audience. It's a great way to signal that you're no longer in scene. So if you're in scene, you suddenly turn out to the audience and go, oh, and I'm so happy about this thing that's happening, but I won't tell my my scene partner. And then you turn back in and you're like, I'm normal. You get that dramatic irony in there, and your partner knows that this O is not really audible to everyone else.
And just reel it back for a second, Sean, but what does O mean?
What does O mean? I think
Yeah,
it's
does
just
it
an
mean anything?
exclamation.
It's
It's
just
like,
an exclamation. It doesn't mean anything. But it can mean anything. No?
yeah, it can mean anything. It can mean I'm so sad. It can mean oh, I'm so happy.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
I'm so surprised.
emotions are going to be a very important part of Shakespeare. And, if you've been listening thus far, they're kind of what makes Shakespeare Shakespeare. But in order to talk about Shakespeare emotions in the Shakespeare context, we're going to want to talk more generally about how we do emotions in improv. So there are two kind of spectrums that Hal has that I think are very helpful to think about how we play emotions.
Yeah, so the two kind of like the axes that I was thinking might be useful for categorizing the Shakespeare ones are the first idea of sort of genuine or real emotions to sort of feigned sarcastic over emotions. If you listen to the Matt Chapman episode, you might have heard him talking about that. And what I found is that like a lot of the improv that I see people doing, especially the comedic improv, people kind of exist more in this realm of feigned emotions where they're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm so scared. And they're not really looking scared. And that's sort of where all the comedy is coming from. And then real emotions would be leaning into the more of the acting side, and your breath is in it, and oh, you're trying to genuinely portray that you are scared in some way. Maybe your body is trembling, you're stepping backwards, you're making yourself smaller,
So
etc.
bring yourself back to high school geometry. This is one of the lines that we're thinking of. On the far left is real emotions, and on the far right is feigned emotions.
Mm-hmm.
But expand your mind two-dimensionally. And on the other axis, we have
Small to big. Yeah, sometimes you're feeling a little happy and you're just like, yeah, I'm pretty happy right now. And sometimes you're like, I'm so happy.
yeah, and these are distinct from real and feigned emotions, right? You can have any kind of combination of these two emotions. You can have a real big emotion, a feigned small emotion, and then anywhere along the spectrum.
Yeah, Julian, what would a big feigned emotion sound like?
You meanie, little bee.
Your audio cut out in that. It was
It was too big.
big.
It was too big. It was off the spectrum. But big feigned emotions, like you say, I think are the common kind of improv in the wild emotions that you see. And sometimes it breaks my heart when people are like, wow, Johnny has amazing emotion play. When all Johnny does is pull off these extremely huge feigned emotions. Like it's cool to have that range to be able to do big emotions, but hopefully this other spectrum of real to feigned is helpful.
That's funny because I actually feel like it's also some of the opposite exists as well, where you see a lot of improv where just all the emotions are small, especially with people who are kind of newer to it. Just because most people live their lives with pretty small emotions. Because one thing about theater is like I feel like the emotions in theater kind of have the potential to get bigger than most emotions you would just do in normal life, even if they're kind of in the real spectrum, because the scenarios can be so intense. But also Matt Chapman had a like funny thing that he always used to say that I love, which was like he would do this thing where he'd be like, all right, be happy at a 1, be excited at a 2, be excited at a 3, go all the way up to 10. And by 10, you were this clown who was like, like jumping around and screaming and running and being so excited. And he's like, most people just in their lives don't ever go above a 3.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. My baby was born. How satisfying this feels. So just getting used to playing and bigger. But which quadrant would you say that good improvised or unscripted Shakespeare falls into?
I would say that real and big would be the quadrant that I would most want to see in unscripted Shakespeare. Because that is Shakespeare. Shakespeare has these very outlandish plots, these very huge emotions. Surely, you have some sort of cultural context about some Shakespeare. Think Romeo and Juliet, right? They are insanely, absurdly in love with one another, but they're very like truly feeling these emotions. Now,
yeah, that's the camp I'm in. It's hard to pull off, of course, but that's where the audience big reaction is going to come from, is if it seems like you're genuinely, because even in a comedy, there's often moments where you think that your love is dead and you think that, all is lost, or where you're extraordinarily angry at someone who tricked you, or any of the above. And I think how the clowning in comedy works actually is playing on these really rapid fire changes of like you're at your absolute lowest point. You just found out that your partner died, and then suddenly someone comes in and brings you the news that they're alive, and you're like joyous and running around, and then more news comes and they're dead, and and being able to turn on that dime.
And so we have like, different things we're going to talk about that I think will help to some degree with like real and feigned emotions, like the next thing, for example. But what do you think are helpful ways for people to expand their small, big spectrum beyond what they might have right now?
One of the, this isn't related to real versus feigned, but one of the things that I think in general people don't do enough of is this idea of, okay, obviously you're not necessarily really feeling the emotion on stage, and that you're not actually mad at the other player. But when someone gets angry, their blood starts pumping a lot more. They have physical symptoms, maybe their, I don't know, like pupils dilate or like things like
Mm-hmm.
that. So if I know I'm going to be in a scene where I am operating at a really intense level of emotion,
Mm-hmm.
which you often do in long form narrative improv through context, I will physically try to get myself to that state. So
Yeah.
maybe that's on the side, like clenching my fist really tight and breathing harder. Breath is a
Mm-hmm.
huge one. And maybe even like if I'm backstage running around in a circle and like doing push up or like just anything so that when you come on stage, you're genuinely wired. And
Mm-hmm.
then the other thing is the stage partner thing, which is if you're going to scare somebody, be scary and, sneak up behind them and go boo or whatever. And that'll get a genuine.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of like, being able to play big versus playing small, I feel like like you say, you kind of have to commit to what that looks like first, and then you'll fill in some of the details. So take one thing, for example, like you said, clenching fists is something you might do when you're mad. And this maybe can happen outside of a scene, just like everybody's doing this on their own, but like try clenching your fist and then just see what that might cause in the rest of your body. What is the natural thing if your fist is clenching that your legs do? Okay, like, maybe they're also kind of like tense and shaking or something. And just think about every part of your body and how every part of your body might embody this emotion.
Mhm.
I think this is the kind of thing that is helpful to have like a director who has some experience with, like in the room, because that's an easy thing for the director to say, okay, literally just do this with your body to make your
Mhm.
emotions bigger.
Yeah, because I mean, I work at a preschool right now, and I think that one of the things is like they are very unrestrained in their emotions. They do this rapid fire. I'm so happy, and then you take the thing away from them, they're bawling, and they'll throw themselves on the ground and like go crazy. And I think and those are genuine, real emotions, but doing this over the top thing. And I think that's kind of what you're channeling in Shakespeare, where like
Mhm.
no matter how mad I was at you, I probably wouldn't start like pounding the ground with my fist, or if I was really sad, I probably wouldn't throw my whole body on the chair and let out a giant cry. But
Yeah.
so getting used to doing these things that would feel embarrassing and like not something that you would necessarily actually do in real life. But it is kind of freeing to actually just, get like throw your whole body on the floor and weep and that kind of thing. And it's fun.
Yeah. And while we're still on this like kind of thing of feeling the genuine emotions in the scene, um, which, like you said, does cross into like the real versus feigned axis. What are ways like in a scene that, if you are in a scene with me or anybody else, and for example, it's you're trying to like feel joyous, right? What are ways that you can like actually try to like spark real joy in me, for example? And
Oh.
like I can start in that like uh one of the things that is pretty widespread throughout the nation in improv is like messing around with each other,
Mm-hmm.
making each other do like silly things. That's something that comes to mind for me. If I was with a scene partner that I know and I'm friends with, I might do to try to get a rise out of them and get that real emotion.
Mm-hmm. And joy is a high energy emotion. So you might grab the other person's hand and pull them across the stage. And,
Yeah,
if you're comfortable with them, like hug them or spin them or like any of those things can amp that up.
yeah,
And I think the big thing with all of this is this idea of reaction
uh-huh,
of like, if you plan ahead, that's why I have trouble acting in like scripted stuff is like, if you know what's coming, it's not going to play as real. And there's sometimes in Shakespeare where you kind of know, like obviously my character doesn't know that everything's going to be all right, but I as a player already know it. But
mhm.
still, I think just if you have a really good sense of what your character knows, what they care about, and what they want, and then every time something that you don't want happens, you're like, oh, just let that out before it even happens. And every time something you want is like, oh, just let that fully
Yeah.
inhabit your body. But always as a reaction to something happening, not just as a kind of random thing.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess when you're playing these, this is a call back to like our intimacy episode, and we've mentioned this concept otherwise, but great time to remember to tap in and tap out.
Yeah.
In particular, I'm thinking about like a lot of argument scenes can get pretty like heavy and hot. And yeah, you're going to want to tap out of that.
Yeah. Very, very true. But with that, we're getting into this idea of like emotions, like how they kind of arise in the scene and how they change. And there's this, I think the emotional lateral is kind of an interesting, this isn't on our show notes, but what I found true in real life and in improv is that it's actually easier for me to go from one high intensity emotion to another high intensity emotion than it is for me to change how intense my emotion is. Sometimes it depends. It depends on the situation.
Sure. But, horseshoe theory.
Yeah. If I'm really excited and then something happens that's bad, I can become really sad. And sometimes if like in moments when I'm really sad, I try to make myself like really worried. And then I try to turn that worry into like excitement, which is like a silly, a silly thing to do. But I think that's one kind of thing of like, but what about coming on with an emotion? Like, do you feel like that's planning, or do you feel like that's in the realm of not planning?
Yeah, this one is a touchy one. I think it does depend a lot on the context of the show. For example, if there's already like a pretty established relationship between who's already on stage and the character that you're playing, coming on with an emotion feels, to some degree like, okay, you're coming on with a hit for the scene. Like if I am playing your father and I come on angry and there's something that you just did recently, then that's, coming on with a pretty fully formed premise. But I think if there's less of like a context and expectation around the scene, then coming on with an emotion is not really planning, would be my take on it.
Yeah, I'm more in the it's not really planning camp. If you're not planning why you're upset or what's like if you're willing to find out those kind of details, I think even just in any improv scene, if you spin a wheel in your head and pick a random emotion and come on feeling that pretty intensely towards the other person, like your scene will just be a lot better.
Yeah. And do you try to, if you come on with an emotion, are you trying to communicate that to your scene partner, like kind of in an out of character way, or are you mostly just existing with that emotion and like willing to switch emotions if your scene partner maybe reads it slightly wrong?
Yeah, it's a bummer when I'll switch what's up based on what they do. I'm a very flexible player, but I think that one of the things that I try to teach people in the intro things, when I teach intro things, is this idea of like what is going on in the scene doesn't really matter very much at all in normal non-Shakespeare stuff.
Yeah.
Mainly what matters is how the other people feel about it and sort of what's being unsaid. So you may be talking about making a sandwich and you're physically making a sandwich, but there's this underlying thing of I'm jealous of you. And then at some point in the scene, what makes the scene sort of arc out and feel satisfied is this, you never pay any attention to me. Like you've been doing all this other stuff. And like that, so you do 2 beats where you're talking about the sandwich and that's the undertone. And then 1 beat where that's the overtone. And that's a very satisfying way to play. But what do you do? Like sometimes you're not in a perfect situation and you wind up in a scene that is kind of emotionless and you're just at this deli, like getting your sandwich. Is there a way that once you have that meta realization in your scene, is there something that you can do?
Yeah, 100%. And this is something that I love to direct as well. It goes along very well with a game that I'll flag right here that we played a lot in our coming up of improv, but it's called It's Tuesday. And the concept here is you might be doing a normal scene, and in the case that you presented, maybe a kind of lackluster, emotionless scene. And then someone might say a line as innocuous as "It's Tuesday." Obviously there's no like big immediate reaction you might have upon hearing that. But as an improviser, your goal is to have a massive emotional reaction to that. But the thing is here, you having this big reaction to It's Tuesday, why? right? That's the immediate question that I have if an improviser has that. And at that point, it's on you to justify why you had that big reaction to It's Tuesday, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and well, for Shakespeare, like you can just have it so that someone's directing a scene, they can make a rule of like whenever the director claps their hands,
Mm-hmm.
you have to turn out and go like, oh, with some emotions, and maybe it's like, oh, or whatever, and then it's similar to the metaphor circle that we did last time. We'll touch on that again, maybe, but you almost can make the O not knowing at all why you're saying it. And you can, even if you still don't know at the end of that O, you can be like, oh,
Yeah.
I am so sad because I feel like I have been forgotten on my birthday or whatever.
Yeah.
You can buy a little time with the emotion.
Yeah, I would say that this applies very generally. Like one of my favorite like side coaching things to say if I'm side coaching a scene and it really is kind of dragging is after any sort of line. I don't really try to pick them too heavily, but in the same It's Tuesday way, just say the name of the person, Johnny, big reaction, and just have them do a big reaction and then justify it from there.
And you can also, if you want to do the clap anger or whatever.
Yeah.
Clap happy. And then they have to justify what. And obviously you can play this like a short form game where you're like clap anger and the next one you're like clap happy and the next one. And that gets at the feigned big, which can be very funny at different times.
Yeah.
For this context, I think that having the side coach be someone who's trying to support and help the person to make the choices that they already should have been making is more of like clap at a moment where it actually might be a big reaction and maybe they just didn't. So maybe it's less of It's Tuesday and more it's like your son died.
Yeah.
Dad. Please, for the love of God, look actually sad about this.
Yeah. And my take on that kind of thing, it would be that you start off at that level where you are trying to react big to things you would react largely to. But as you get more familiarity with like playing with emotion, that you can truly try to do that short form style. You're happy, then you're sad, and actually play it realistically. So like the way that it's maybe most often presented in like a more short form setting is probably like the final goal, the final boss that you're trying to conquer.
Yeah. Well, that's what Matt always says about clown too. It's like the pinnacle of but yeah, doing it well is the pinnacle. Doing it poorly is the
yeah, your form matters most. But let's talk about metaphor, right?
Yeah, we're just gonna hit this. We hit this in the last episode. We hit this in the first episode. We're gonna hit this again. It's a great exercise. This is you're turning out. You're talking to the audience. What follows that? Oftentimes it can just be sometimes it's just a justification of like, oh, I feel this way because I haven't told the other person yet, but I'm in love with them or whatever. And you're just talking to the audience. But sometimes it's just an expression of an emotion, and where this is going to be followed by is a soliloquy. And last time we talked about it from the language perspective of turning it into a linguistic metaphor of like, my love is like this apple, for the same way that the apple grows big in the springtime, so too when I feel the warm weather, do I radiate more love for the farmer who does come by my window or whatever.
Yeah.
Not my best one. But I think today what we're going to try to talk about is running that same circle from your previous practice, but doing it emotion focused. And we already talked last time about taking away the Shakespearean language and putting in the big emotion. But really trying to be like, all right, get physical with it, get low, get high, throw yourself on the ground, start with a giant O. And really the whole time you're talking, try to have that emotion showing.
Yeah, all of these things are going to come together to like make the Shakespeare show, but this is more about isolating the muscles. And for this practice, I think it would be helpful to go all in on emotions. You know, people are dropping their doths and their Shakespeare and whatnot, that's fine. But focus on being able to achieve the what we believe to be the hotspot of real and big emotions.
Mm-hmm. And isolating is a great word. I feel like you can tinker with in whatever way you want, but whatever roadblock you see that people are stumbling upon that isn't the main thing that you're trying to teach, just take that roadblock out. And one of the most common ones is language. And this is going to get us into the Muprov Musings original MUnologue. This is an exercise that I actually came up with before whatever of our show. But for building confidence for people in speaking, I would often have them, give an expert lecture on cows, where they have to just start telling you all these facts as if they were an expert. And beginner improvisers often struggle with this. So then the classic improv exercise is to have them do it again in gibberish and focus more on their body, physicality, and gibberish is like, Geschmucken, Farken, Darken, Legen, and Spargalugi Boo. But I find that really challenging. Other people, I think, do as well, coming up with all those fake words. So the idea is replace all those words with just the syllable moo. So now you're a cow giving a lecture on cows, and you're like, moo, moo, moo. Moo, 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 moo. And that's not really relevant to Shakespeare. But you can take the metaphor circle and you can say, my love is like this apple, and do it all in moos of like, moo, 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 moo. And give a really big long one and then say, all right, do the exact same thing that you just did with all the same motions that your arms made and all the same expressions that your face made. And now try to add in language on top of that. Yeah.
And stop me if I'm wrong, but I would flag here that the goal here is not to charades it and be able to do this MUnologue where you're like physically conveying the things that you're actually saying. It's just to go all in on the expression of emotion.
Yeah, Julian, I did not stop you because you're so not wrong. Charades is the enemy of all gibberish. Almost like ban space objects from existence if you're going to be taking away language. And we actually jumped ahead of one thing that I wanted to talk about, which is just the idea of like doing emotions in improv. Because I definitely want to. It would be wrong for me to even start to talk about emotions without mentioning Cameron Most, who's another member of the group who was really pushing for us to integrate emotions. And at the time, our sophomore year, when Cameron was first pushing them and the practice of them specifically, I was super skeptical and kind of a jerk and was like, what are we doing? Like, I know what happy is. I know what sad is. And what I actually found out was that I literally did not know what a lot of emotion words kind of meant in particular in terms of also conveying them. And a lot of other people don't either.
Yeah. I mean, we exist as people who have emotions, so we think that we're experts on that. But trying to put it into words or like actually have an understanding of it, like do this with your improv group, go around and literally just do a ball where you're saying the names of emotions. I bet you within 20, you're going to get like hungry as like one of your emotions, which is, kind of highly debatably an emotion.
Yeah, that would be highly, the difference between like hurt or feelings and, emotions. And then also just understanding like, okay, do you know the difference between jealous and envious? Or like, do you know the difference between, angry and frustrated? How about frustrated and bothered? Or like just trying to like take words that are very similar and being able to actually go through. And it helps. I have a lot of these charts, but they were all handwritten because of when I was concussed. But you can find emotion wheels online and just go through, find the most similar words and just check, make sure everyone in the group knows the difference between them. And then also play games where, one exercise that you can do. This is another Cameron exercise. for just sort of getting a sense of whether the emotion that you're thinking is actually being conveyed to other people and whether you actually understand what other people are doing when they're doing emotions, is to practice, either silently or with an O or in a scene, trying to pick a nuanced emotion from the wheel, like hostile or courageous or like, so something a little like a precise word, and try to express that and see if the other people can guess the exact precise emotion word that you are trying to demonstrate. And then I added a scoring system that I think is very fun for this game, which is the person who's doing the emotion gets 1 point for every person who guesses it correctly, and everyone who guesses correctly gets 1 point. So matching is rewarded.
Yeah, if you are a group who loves to play games and get competitive, that can be helpful. I'll just flag here, literally Google feelings wheel or emotion wheel, go to images and just like click one of the ones that has a bunch of the emotions on the exterior. And you'll see what we're saying here, where there are some that are like next to each other that are very unclear, right? Like helpless versus frightened, or annoyed versus infuriated. And I think that there's like a lot of ways that you can explore what the differences between these are. Like you can literally try to like Google, like, what is the difference? But I think something that is helpful is talking through as a group what you collectively perceive the difference to be. And I don't think that it's important to actually know like these specific words super well and be like, oh, well, actually betrayed is this, and actually, indignant is this. It's more working through having like a nuanced understanding of some specific emotions as a tool that will help you to have more nuanced emotions going forward.
All right, I'll push back on you a little bit, Julian.
Push.
I actually came in with the same opinion that you have of like, well, why does it matter? Like I'm feeling this. I'm not thinking about this. But I think that there is like a specific skill of getting good at, even just in real life, when you're feeling something, being able to label it precisely. And there's a lot of science around showing that when people are able to precisely label their emotions, they can both moderate them better and like it actually can affect how the person feels the emotion as well, of like, oh, if I realize that I'm jealous, that kind of can take some of the sting out of it. And the reverse is true in improv. If you can become aware of the emotion that your character is feeling, then it can, especially of the precise emotion that your stage partner is feeling, then that can convey a huge amount of information to you. So if you're like, oh, I can tell that person is feeling jealous in this scene, that will suddenly give you tons of things to work off. You know how to poke at them and what will bother them. As if you're just like, why are they acting so like defensive or when they're around me and like trying to keep me all to themselves, like so annoying that they keep on coming up to me. Like the difference between those two things is subtle, but I think it is helpful.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Let me amend what I meant to say here, in that no individual emotion wheel, I think, is like the gospel. Yeah. Like just learn to be able to state these things in more nuanced terms, but like as long as collectively as a group you're kind of on the same page, it doesn't matter, that you are on the quote unquote right page, because I think that there is no like right way to divvy up these emotions.
Yeah. I will. Well, but I generally agree with the concept of like, work together as a group and add in your, like, basically form your own of like, anyone that you find is going to be kind of incomplete and have some things that are kind of wrong or whatever. Okay, we've digressed a little bit, but it's worth
And real quick, as we're just still on the road of emotions, after you've done some of this emotional work, one of our very common things like that we do when we start a scene, just a scene in general, is like, what's the location, what's the relationship? Just throw in what's an emotion as one of your like scene starters, even in an outside of Shakespeare context. Because if you're commonly doing this like through all of your formats, then it's going to build and it's going to build, and you're going to get better at it.
Yeah. And I'll also throw in, like, there are going to be some people in your group who really, really need this, and particularly certain men. Often, like, there are certain emotions where they literally just, you give it to them and they can't play it without laughing. That's something that I've seen very much in intro classes of, like, they start trying to do it and they just can't. And it's like, okay, you got to build up the skill of practicing doing it, because it's pretty foreign for some people, especially people who aren't emotionally expressive in their day-to-day lives.
Yeah, practice makes perfect.
All right. But back into Shakespeare land. One way, if you don't want to be as precise about the words to get this out, is to use scenarios that would obviously evoke a big emotion from people. And again, taking out the language for this day, because usually after you do your language practice, everyone is stressed and like worried and like, I feel so bad at this. So coming in with the second day of like, channel that emotion that they're all feeling. You'd be like, okay, we're all feeling this. Let's get rid of that and feel freed by this and relieved and excited, and just get into our bodies and move around a lot and throw ourselves on the floor. And this moo thing is really, really useful for that. Of like, all right, we're going to do these scenes where we're just going moo, 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 moo. And so giving people scenarios often helps with that, so they're not just doing charades. Where it's like, okay, we kind of know what is going on in the scene. We don't have to communicate that. We're just
yeah, and we have some specific scenarios actually for you that would be helpful to try out in this sort of moo setting, where you're doing it in the monologue form.
Yeah. So a classic one is one of these emotion swings, which is thinking that your lover is dead and then reuniting with them. So maybe one person starts off on stage. They're going to be devastated and giving a sort of devastated monologue, despair. And then someone's going to come in and reveal, oh, I'm here and I'm alive. But all moo, 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 moo. And they're going to joyously reunite and express all those emotions through moos.
Yeah, that's a great one. Another one is a scene in which between a parent and a child, in which your child is going off to war. So that's all the premise you need, and you just moo it out between the two of you of how that feels.
Yeah, and it's fun to like try to get the emotion to change over the course of the scene. So maybe at the start the parent is really reluctant to have the child to go off to war, but maybe by the end they're accepting and loving and begging a ruler to save your lover's life. This happens all the time in Shakespearean comedies. The ruler has sentenced your lover to death, and you have to come to them and be like, please, 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 please. But rather than say please, 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 you say moo, 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 moo.
You can do a classic love confession and acceptance between two characters. So one character moo, 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 their love to the other, and the other might accept it. And that's another kind of emotional shift where assumedly the first improviser is a little more nervous and apprehensive in the first part, and then total expression of love in the second.
Yeah, if you want, you can do one where they're both nervous, where they like turn out to the audience at the beginning and give a little like nervous thing, and then they and then the last one, Julian thought it would be good to have one really positive one. So just like practice celebration or joy through some sort of scene, maybe like between two people who have just won a big battle or done a big performance or gotten a big promotion, and they're just, you know, maybe drinking and dancing and having fun and just loudly expressing their joy in moo form.
Yeah.
But is that all, or does everyone get off the hook after being big, physical, and emotive?
Well, no. I mean, in some sense, it gave you all the skills that you'll need, but it's very helpful to and instructive, I think, to run this again, but actually do these scenes with real words now instead of just moos. So similar to the metaphor exercise that we described before. You do it with the moves, but then you go through and you try to hit all of the same beats that you did in the MUnologue form, but actually using your words now. And
Oh, yeah.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just you might be saying the exact same thing. So why don't you go first?
Sure. Which is hopefully in the this is an isolation kind of exercise where you spent the first scene feeling these emotions and you've done that work already. So hopefully it's easier to embody the exact same level of emotional commitment and you're just now layering on the language instead of having to do it all at once.
Yeah. I was just gonna say I have both as just sadistic pleasure, but I like to make everyone run all the moo scenes before they know. Because if you tell one person to do a moo scene then redo it, then everyone else knows it's coming and they're going to be more self-conscious in the original scene. But I think it's better when you don't know that it's whenever it's coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I get a lot of joy out of that. And I think one thing that I found is that's really big in this kind of work is that depending on your ensemble, it might take a lot longer than you think to get people to get it for certain people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's worth giving people multiple chances.
Mm-hmm.
It can sometimes feel frustrating to ask when someone asks you to redo a scene 3 times in a row or something, or redo a monologue 3 times in a row. But sometimes it's really freeing. And I think setting that up as like an expectation and being like, even if someone's good, having them redo it 1 or 2 times is a good thing to do so that it doesn't look like you're just singling out individual people and having them try again and again.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there really is like if you are the director, the person running a given practice, it's very attractive to be like, okay, let's move on. Because time is money. But if you actually like kind of go hard and make sure that someone gets it right, that is very instructive to that person.
Yeah. For context on that, like just the emotion game where you're guessing the emotion, in practice for I guess it was a little bit before a new play, but I think we had maybe 6 or 7 2-hour practices where we picked, a broad category of emotion like joy for one of them. And then I had a ton of nuanced joy words. And basically for the full 2 hours, we were just playing versions of that game with joy. And then the next week we would do fear. And then, so like you can lean into this stuff pretty hard.
Yeah. Yeah. There's kind of another thing. So, do we feel good about, what we've talked about here? Because there's another sort of orthogonal issue with emotion in improv that I wanted to bring up and ask you
Go for it.
Which is related to these because all of these scenes are, except for the final, maybe have like an emotional arc where it shifts from one thing to another over the course of it. But I'm wondering how you feel about emotional intensity over the course of a scene and whether you think that emotions should ramp up over the course of a scene or whether it always depends on context or if there are any kind of rules or guidelines. Because one baseline thing that I'll throw out there is that it's helpful to start a scene leaving space to go in either direction. It's sometimes difficult or limiting if you start a scene at your absolute 10 of like anger or happiness, unless like the context really calls for that, because then you don't have as much room to move up or down.
Yeah. My answer to that is like I think because for Muprov, I think that emotions often take the form of what comedy does or what the bit or the game or the joke does for a normal scene. The baseline idea of we escalate then it arcs is kind of true, and it's true over the course of a whole show too. For most shows of like hero's journey, the emotions slowly rise in intensity as it goes. However, the places where I think that isn't true is like the beginning of a show. It sometimes really springboards a show to start out with a ton of emotion, actually. Because a lot of times they get mired in this kind of low thing. And this idea of it's not even really that possible to come on stage at a 10. it's really hard to get there without another partner who's not doing it in a committed way. And that's part of why I have so much trouble jamming with people who, I'm not as comfortable with, because if so much of how I do it is genuinely reacting to someone else who's also genuinely reacting to me. And if someone else is blocking me or being goofy, it's hard. That's hard for, so I think that if you come on really like at a high level, you probably can get higher if you have a partner who can reflect that on you. But be careful about, if you come on, you're 10 angry and they're like, oh, like you feel like you have just been stripped naked and betrayed. So
I think there's a stamina concept here too, right? Just as we might mention with like accents or something. It's not super advisable to come on with an emotion that is not sustainable for some period of time. And part of that might be just the game of building up your emotional stamina through exercises like this. But I think when it comes to like showtime and you're like actually doing this, keeping that in mind and picking like a emotional intensity that you can sustain over the course of a scene would be a good idea.
Yeah, I feel like I don't have that issue. I mean, especially in a show, you have an audience, you have so much adrenaline and stuff like that. For me, I think it amplifies. Like the more wound up I get, the more the easier it is to keep going, rather than but then after the show you feel like, after the extra scary slasher, I was up until like 4 a.m. I was so wired. It was horrible.
Yeah. So maybe either keep a eye to your emotional stamina or be Bill Diffie like Hal.
Yeah. those are the two options. But I think that stressing also that this is something that you can build or work on, because I think that I honestly, with it, like take me back a couple of years, I think that I knew very little about emotion. Not to the point where I would say I was emotionally stunted necessarily, but certainly like pretty oblivious to the emotions I was feeling in real life. And I thank improv a lot, and Cameron and others who sort of gave me advice about stuff that I eventually listened to for just making my life better as well, in terms of you can build the skill in improv and it can just be applied to your real life, which is a pretty game changer.
Yeah, I mean, improv is super fun because you can be like, oh, what if we were crocodile brothers who owned a cafe, and you explore that kind of mentally. But you can also explore, what if I was just a person who felt this feeling, and try to build some nuance into that. And then you carry that with you. Oh, that's what it feels like to do that.
Yeah, like this is gonna sound bad, but like all the time, like I register of like almost scene wise of like, oh, if this conversation was a scene, like that person's character would be feeling like sad, right?
Yeah.
And I comfort not exactly. That is pushing it a little bit further than maybe but there is a little element of that to my real I think that the same with support. If you build support in improv, it comes off the court too.
Yeah. So, we're rambling a bit, but we're just trying to stress to you that emotion in improv is a very helpful skill that you can build. It'll make your scenes more interesting, might make your life more interesting. And particularly, we're talking about this during Shakespeare because it's like necessary for Shakespeare in order to do Shakespeare in the way that we recommend, and I think anybody would recommend. But this is one of those episodes that I think will apply to many, if not all, formats going forward.
Yeah, hopefully this is the thing that Shakespeare will help you the most with other stuff. And I really hope whoever's out there, if you're directing, have the courage to be like, no, that is not you're not doing that in a realistic way. You're, push harder or whatever. Because I think yeah, I think it's important for people to build up these skills. And if your people are pushing back on you and being pain in your butt, just know that they might ultimately come around and be pretty impacted by it.
Well, okay, I'm not going to fully co-sign that sentiment in the sense of I think that's important as a director that we all try to help our cast grow in a way that is receptive to them. So, if you're a director and you're doing this and it's really not hitting with your people, then also consider how you might change your framing, how you might change all of the kind of meta things around it in order to get it to be received. But I do totally agree that the message is vital.
That's true. I mean, that's the other side of emotional awareness, right? Figure out what emotion that are the people reacting negatively because they themselves are feeling insecure about being able to do this, or are they reacting because they're bored, or are they, what's the driver to?
Yeah.
So if you got to be able to dice and slice if you're going to be able to.
You got to be able to dice and slice if you're going to be able to give advice. I think that's a wonderful quote to end on.
All right, then this has been Muprov
Musings.
So my sign off is that I'm now one link of connection off TJ Jagodowski, because for those of you who are familiar, TJ and Dave are my improv heroes. They're super cool. And up until now, I've been infinite links, 6 degrees of connection off of them, besides having gone to see them in a bunch of shows. And this weekend, my boss invited me to a music jam. I'm not good at any instruments. With those of you who are big fans of TJ Jagodowski may know that he also stars in the Sonic commercials for Sonic restaurants.
Yeah.
And my boss's music jam with his friends from high school includes the other guy from the Sonic commercials. So where I'm going after this is to go right after recording the show. I'm going to go see the other guy from the Sonic commercials perform 2-person improv in Brooklyn.
Wow.
So I'm super stoked. And
yeah, you should bring a chili dog.
Yeah, I've never been to a Sonic. They're down south, right?
I was there yesterday, or I wasn't there, but I had Sonic yesterday.
Really? I thought it was a southern thing.
It's in California.
Oh.
Yeah. Yabba yabba. That's awesome though. You're so close. Well, no. I mean, your sign off was way better, but I do have a sign off, which is
you can say it.
I don't know.
What is it?
Okay, so my sign off is that I have been playing through Super Mario Bros. Wonder after getting back for break, and I really like it. And there is a concept in it that is super that I wish we could just do. We could just do in improv. So the kind of shtick with this Mario game, because it's called Mario Bros. Wonder, is there are these wonder flowers that you can get in each level. And when you get the wonder flower, there's no prescribed thing that happens, just something wonderful happens. So like in the second level, when you get it, all of the piranha plants start singing and they do a dance, or, sometimes you'll get it and there's a big blizzard. But like the unifying concept here is just that something wonderful happens. And it like kind of gets at, like, I think in some movies and stuff, people, even in one of our new plays, people like the moment where, the drugs are kicking in and it's all crazy. And that's kind of what Mario Wonder is doing with these wonder flowers. And I think that we have to use this wonder concept in like all of media. Like you can always just like get the wonder flower in any like TV or book, and then just things get crazy.
Julian, it's almost like wonder is an emotion. Yeah. But I mean, you could literally hide some wonder flowers on stage, and whenever you find one, it's like getting iced. You have to.
Yeah. It's like hard block, or like, when you get the wonder flower, you just have to endow something insane that's happening now.
I used to give Will or like I do it with other people too, but a little invisible button, and I put it on his arm and I say, this is just, if you're ever really struggling in a show, you can just press this invisible button and go giga mode and just
yeah, exactly. It's kind of like the giga mode concept. But it's just more like wacky, crazy, and I love it. And I love the game.
Oh, can't you see me now? Can't you see me now? Like you did back then. Can't you see me now? I remember way back when. Oh, and times they are changing. You know, things are rearranging. Can't you see me now? Can't you see me now? Everything is changing. Can't you see me now? Can't you see me now?